The wild does not announce itself with noise. It moves quietly, governed by rhythms older than memory, unfolding according to rules that rarely need explanation. Light arrives and recedes. Wind shifts direction. Life responds not with hesitation, but with alignment. For most of the natural world, survival has always been a matter of timing, being exactly where instinct demands, exactly when it demands it. From a distance, everything appears balanced. Predators move with purpose. Prey reacts with precision. The space between them feels measured, almost fair, as if nature has settled into an understanding with itself. In this world, instinct is not a suggestion. It is instruction. It arrives fully formed, asking no questions and offering no alternatives. And for a long time that has been enough. Instinct has guided movement through open ground and dense cover alike. It has dictated when to advance and when to withdraw, when to conserve energy and when to spend it without hesitation. It has shaped bodies, sharpened senses, and written outcomes long before they ever unfold. The wild rewards those who obey. But this balance depends on something fragile: consistency. The rules of survival work best when the environment remains predictable, when seasons arrive on time, when patterns repeat often enough to be trusted, when threats behave as they always have. Instinct thrives in familiarity, even when that familiarity includes danger. What happens when that familiarity begins to shift? The land changes first. Not dramatically, not all at once. A slight alteration in terrain, a shift in weather that lingers longer than expected, the quiet arrival of new pressures that do not follow old patterns. At first, these changes feel temporary exceptions that instinct can absorb without effort. But exceptions accumulate. Moments arise where timing no longer aligns cleanly, where the response that once guaranteed survival now feels delayed or misplaced or incomplete. Instinct still speaks, but the environment no longer answers in the same way. In those moments, survival becomes uncertain. The wild does not adapt all at once. It tests slowly, revealing its new demands in fragments. A missed opportunity here, a narrow escape there. Each one small enough to ignore, but together, they begin to rewrite the margins that once felt secure. This is where the story begins, not with a chase, not with a confrontation, but with a question that nature never needed to ask before. What happens when instinct is no longer perfectly matched to the world it evolved to master? In the wild, hesitation is often treated as failure. But hesitation is not always weakness. Sometimes it is memory. Sometimes it is adaptation trying to form. Sometimes it is the first sign that the rules are no longer fixed. Nature does not pause to explain this shift. It simply continues. Life moves forward, carrying old instincts into new conditions, forcing choices that were never meant to exist. The cost of those choices does not arrive immediately. It reveals itself over time, through altered paths, narrowing options, and consequences that feel disproportionate to the moment that caused them. From the outside, these moments are easy to miss. They do not look dramatic. They leave no clear mark on the land. But within them, survival begins to change shape. What once depended on speed now demands restraint. What once rewarded decisiveness now punishes it. And what once felt certain becomes conditional. The wild does not judge these moments. It measures them. Every choice is recorded, not in memory, but in outcome. The environment remembers what the body cannot afford to forget. It adjusts its pressure accordingly, tightening or loosening its grip without intention or malice. This is not a story about failure. It is a story about misalignment, about what happens when the most reliable guide instinct meets a world that no longer behaves as expected, when survival becomes less about doing what has always worked and more about enduring what no longer does. In the chapters that follow, this question will take form through consequence rather than explanation. Through moments where the old rules falter and new ones demand payment without warning. The wild will not announce when the balance breaks. It never does. It only reveals it to those still inside the moment, forced to choose, without knowing whether instinct will save them, or quietly lead them somewhere it no longer understands. In the wild, survival is governed by rules that do not change their tone. They are not spoken. They are not negotiated. They are followed or they are paid for. These rules are built around efficiency. Energy must be spent only when return is likely. Movement must be timed, not impulsive. Exposure must be brief. In a world where resources are finite and danger is constant, hesitation is costly, not because it is wrong, but because it disrupts alignment. The first law is timing. Every action has a window. Too early, and energy is wasted. Too late, an opportunity closes. Instinct exists to solve this problem instantly, compressing decision into reaction. When timing is correct, survival looks effortless. When it is not, even the strongest bodies fail. The second law is decisiveness. The wild does not reward partial commitment. A movement begun must be completed. A pursuit must end in resolution, success, or withdrawal before it drains more than it gains. Half choices create exposure. Exposure attracts consequence. This is why instinct pushes toward clarity, even when the outcome is uncertain. The third law is consistency. Environments repeat themselves often enough to be learned. Wind follows patterns. Terrain behaves predictably. Threats move according to recognizable rhythms. Instinct is not magic. It is memory refined over generations, shaped by repetition. When the world behaves as expected, instinct works because it aligns with reality. For a long time, these laws have held. They have shaped bodies and behaviors that fit their environments precisely. Speed where speed matters. Stillness where silence saves lives. Retreat when advance would cost too much. The wild is full of these calibrations, invisible until they fail. Failure, when it happens, is usually clear. A mistimed movement. A misread signal. An overextension that cannot be recovered. The consequence arrives quickly and decisively, leaving no ambiguity. This clarity reinforces the rules. Those who survive are those who obey them most closely. But these laws assume one thing: that the environment remains stable enough for instinct to stay accurate. When conditions shift slowly, instinct adapts just as slowly. Generations absorb new patterns, behaviors recalibrate. The rules remain intact because the world gives them time to adjust. The problem arises when change outpaces memory, when new pressures arrive without precedent, when patterns break without repeating long enough to be learned. In these moments, instinct still acts, but it acts on outdated information. The law of timing begins to slip. What once demanded immediate action now punishes it. What once rewarded speed now exposes the body too early. The window does not disappear, it moves. An instinct tuned to the old window arrives late or too soon. Decisiveness, once a strength, becomes risk. Commitment without updated context turns into liability. Actions that used to resolve cleanly now drag on, draining energy and inviting interference. The wild does not distinguish between bravery and error. It only records outcome. Consistency erodes. The environment stops repeating itself. Weather behaves irregularly. Resources appear unpredictably. Threats no longer follow established rhythms. Instinct searches for familiar signals and finds none that align fully. Reaction slows not from weakness, but from uncertainty. This is where the rules begin to strain. The wild does not announce this strain. There is no clear boundary where old laws stop working and new ones begin. Instead, there are moments, small, isolated at first, where obedience to instinct produces results that feel wrong. A chase that should succeed fails. A retreat that should preserve safety increases danger. A choice that has always worked no longer does. At first, these moments are dismissed. Anomaly, bad luck, noise in the system. Instinct absorbs them and continues trusting that the world will return to form. Often it does briefly, enough to reinforce belief in the rules. But belief is not protection. As anomalies accumulate, the margin narrows. The cost of being wrong increases not because the animal has weakened, but because the environment has become less forgiving. Each misalignment compounds, tightening the space in which instinct can operate safely. This is when hesitation appears, not as indecision, but as friction between instruction and outcome. Instinct says move, memory says wait. The body stands between them, forced to choose without certainty. The wild offers no guidance here. It does not adapt to hesitation. It does not slow to accommodate recalibration. It continues applying pressure according to its new shape, indifferent to whether instinct has caught up. The laws have not changed in principle. They have changed in application. Timing still matters, but the window has shifted. Decisiveness still matters, but only when direction is correct. Consistency still matters, but the environment no longer provides it. This is the dangerous middle ground, where the old rules are not fully wrong, but no longer fully right, where survival depends not on obedience, but on interpretation. And interpretation takes time the wild does not provide. The story that follows unfolds inside this tension, not in moments of clear failure, but in the space where instinct and environment argue quietly, where survival is no longer a matter of following rules, but of sensing when those rules have begun to mislead. Because in the wild, the most dangerous moment is not when instinct fails completely. It is when instinct almost works. The ground looks familiar enough to inspire confidence. The contours follow patterns. The body has learned to read subtle rises that offer visibility, shallow depressions that hold scent, narrow corridors where movement can be concealed. This place has been crossed before under conditions that rewarded decisiveness. Here, timing has always mattered more than strength. The moment presents itself cleanly. Distance closes to a range where outcomes are usually decided quickly. The air carries information without distortion. The terrain offers no surprises that would justify delay. According to every rule that has guided survival up to now, this is a moment that demands action. Instinct answers immediately. Muscles tighten. Balance shifts forward. The body aligns itself toward a single direction, compressing uncertainty into readiness. There is no panic, no confusion. The response is calm, practiced, exact, and then nothing happens. Not because the opportunity disappears, not because danger announces itself, but because the timing feels wrong. The body holds suspended between instruction and execution. The alignment remains intact, but the release does not come. A fraction of time passes, small enough to seem insignificant, large enough to matter. The window begins to narrow. What was once optimal becomes merely possible. The body senses this shift and compensates, adjusting angle and posture to preserve advantage. Instinct urges completion. Memory introduces caution. The result is hesitation, not prolonged, but present. The opportunity reacts, not dramatically. It does not flee outright. It shifts position just enough to change the equation. Distance increases by degrees. The terrain that once offered clarity introduces complication. A clean outcome becomes conditional. The body commits late. Movement follows, but it lacks the sharpness it should have had. Speed arrives a heartbeat after it was needed. The alignment that once guaranteed success now requires correction mid-action. Energy is spent closing a gap that should have remained closed. The attempt fails quietly. No collision, no struggle. Just a retreat that leaves the body exposed longer than intended. The opportunity dissolves into the environment, leaving behind only absence and the faint residue of what almost happened. The body slows, breath steadies. Muscles loosen not from relief, but from recalibration. The land returns to stillness, as if the moment never existed. From the outside, it would be easy to miss what went wrong, but something has shifted. The body registers the failure not as loss, but as delay. Energy was spent without return. Timing slipped without explanation. The rules were followed almost perfectly, and still, the outcome did not align. This is the first fracture, small enough to dismiss, large enough to remember. The environment offers no feedback beyond consequence. There is no signal that explains why the window moved, only evidence that it did. The body adjusts posture and continues carrying the moment forward without fully understanding it. The path ahead tightens. The terrain demands more attention now. Each step is measured against the last, recalibrated to account for uncertainty that did not exist before. The body remains capable, but confidence has thinned. Another opportunity appears later, less clean, less obvious. It carries higher cost for lower return. The body evaluates it carefully, weighing energy against probability. Instinct speaks again, quieter this time, urging action before the window closes completely. The body waits a fraction too long. The opportunity disappears without effort. This time the failure feels different. Not surprising, expected. The body adjusts again, shifting strategy to favor conservation. Movement becomes more deliberate. Exposure shortens. The response is intelligent, but it carries consequence. Time passes. Hunger presses closer to the surface. The margin tightens. The land offers no correction. It continues applying pressure according to its own rhythm, indifferent to recalibration. The body senses that something has changed, but cannot locate the source. The rules still apply, but not in the way they used to. By the end of the cycle, the body has learned one thing clearly. Instinct still works, but it no longer works instantly. That delay, barely noticeable, easily rationalized, has already altered outcomes. What once required no thought now demands calculation. What once resolved itself cleanly now leaves residue. The story does not escalate yet. There is no collapse, no immediate danger. Only a narrowing, a subtle compression of time and space that forces the body to adapt without understanding why. The first chapter ends not with failure, but with uncertainty, a realization that something reliable has begun to drift. That obedience to instinct now requires interpretation. And that interpretation introduces a delay the wild rarely forgives. The land does not pause to acknowledge this shift. It simply moves on. The environment does not change abruptly. It tightens. What was once a broad field of options compresses into narrower corridors, each demanding more precision than the last. The land feels the same at first glance, same textures, same gradients, same routes that once offered clean movement. But the timing has shifted. The margins have thinned. The body notices this before the mind does. Movement slows not from fatigue alone, but from recalibration. Each step now carries an extra fraction of attention. The ground responds differently beneath weight. Sound travels farther than expected. Scent lingers where it should dissipate. The signals are subtle, but together they suggest a change in how quickly consequence arrives. Opportunity appears again. This time it is not clean. It presents itself at an angle that demands commitment through uncertainty. The distance is workable, but the terrain between introduces variables that cannot be fully resolved in advance. According to instinct, the window is still open. According to experience, it is closing faster than it used to. The body aligns halfway. Muscles prepare without fully engaging. Balance shifts, but the release is delayed just long enough for the environment to respond. A small change in position ahead alters the geometry. What was direct becomes diagonal. What was efficient becomes expensive. The body commits anyway. The movement is decisive, but it arrives late. Speed compensates for timing, but only partially. Energy is spent correcting rather than advancing. The action resolves without success, ending in withdrawal that costs more than it should have. The failure is no longer quiet. Breath comes harder. The body carries the expense openly now, unable to hide it behind momentum. The land absorbs this display without comment, registering it as data rather than drama. Pressure increases, not immediately, not violently, but persistently. The body senses it as a narrowing of viable paths. Routes that once allowed clean retreat now feel exposed. The choice to disengage carries its own risks, stretching vulnerability across longer distances. Instinct responds by urging earlier action. The logic is sound. If timing is slipping, act sooner. Compress decision further, reduce delay. The body tries this approach at the next opportunity, committing earlier than it feels comfortable doing. This time the result is worse. The early movement exposes position too soon. The environment reacts before alignment is complete. Distance that should have collapsed expands instead. The body is forced into an adjustment mid-action, burning energy to avoid escalation rather than achieve resolution. The lesson lands sharply. Late is costly. Early is costly. The window is no longer where instinct expects it to be. The body adapts by hesitating again, but now the hesitation carries weight. Each pause stretches exposure. Each recalibration announces presence longer than intended. The land does not punish immediately, but it remembers. Hunger tightens its grip. What was once manageable now demands attention. Energy reserves shrink faster than they can be restored. The body compensates by shortening range, favoring familiarity over exploration. This choice stabilizes risk, but reduces opportunity. The environment responds by offering fewer clean moments. Opportunities now appear briefly and resolve quickly. They demand commitment without clarity. The body struggles to interpret them correctly, caught between acting too soon and acting too late. Instinct still speaks, but its voice competes with accumulated evidence. This competition creates friction. Movement loses fluidity. Actions feel segmented rather than continuous. The body no longer flows through space. It negotiates it. Each decision stands alone, disconnected from the certainty that once unified response. Pressure becomes noticeable now, not as threat, but as presence. A repeated alignment of signals that suggests something else is moving through the same space with increasing accuracy. The body does not see it. It feels it in the way silence gathers, in the way paths close shortly after they are chosen. The land has begun to anticipate. The body responds by altering rhythm. It introduces irregular pauses, abrupt changes in direction, shorter bursts of speed followed by longer stillness. This strategy disrupts alignment temporarily, scattering pressure rather than eliminating it. The cost is exhaustion. Each irregular movement drains more energy than a clean one would. Recovery takes longer. The body carries strain forward, unable to reset fully between efforts. Another opportunity presents itself near the edge of familiarity. It is tempting precisely because it offers comfort. The terrain is known. The variables are fewer. Instinct recognizes the pattern and urges commitment with confidence. The body hesitates, not because of fear, but because confidence itself has become suspect. The delay is brief, but it is enough. The moment dissolves before the body can act. The loss feels heavier than the earlier ones, not because it was more important, but because it was supposed to work. This is the escalation, not through danger, but through erosion. Each failure chips away at reliability. The body still functions, but the rules that once governed its success no longer align cleanly with outcome. The environment has not become hostile. It has become exacting. There is no longer room for almost. Actions must now be perfectly timed or not taken at all. Instinct alone cannot guarantee that precision. Experience interferes. Memory intrudes. Calculation slows response. The body stands at a threshold. Continue trusting instinct and risk repeated misalignment, or rely on restraint and accept dwindling opportunity. Neither option offers safety. Both carry cost. The chapter closes without resolution. The body moves on, conserving what remains aware now that the drift noticed earlier has accelerated. The land has not changed its rules. It has narrowed them, and the space left for error, once generous, now forgiving, has begun to disappear entirely. The landscape no longer offers clean solutions. What once felt like a network of options has collapsed into a sequence of compromises, each one demanding something in return. Familiar ground has become unreliable, not because it has changed shape, but because the timing that made it useful has slipped beyond reach. The body senses this immediately. Movement becomes cautious without becoming slow. Every step is placed with intention, but intention no longer guarantees advantage. The terrain responds unpredictably, sound carries where it should fade, scent lingers where it should disperse. The environment feels alert, as if it has learned how to listen. Opportunity appears again, but it arrives distorted. The angle is wrong. The distance is workable only if everything aligns perfectly. Instinct urges commitment, insisting that hesitation will erase the chance entirely. Experience counters with warning, reminding the body of how often these moments have failed. The body splits the difference. It advances partway, testing the environment rather than committing to it. This compromise satisfies neither instinct nor outcome. The movement reveals presence without securing advantage. The window closes, leaving behind only exposure. The cost is immediate. Pressure gathers faster than before. The body feels it as a tightening of space, a sense that retreat would now be more dangerous than advance. The environment has learned this pattern: the half-step, the delayed release, the cautious withdrawal. There is no room left for half-choices. The body withdraws anyway. The movement is controlled but expensive. Energy drains into correction rather than progress. Breath shortens. Muscles carry strain forward, unable to reset fully. The body remains capable, but its margin has thinned to the point where capability alone is no longer enough. Hunger becomes constant, no longer a signal that rises and falls. It settles into the background, shaping every decision. Energy conservation is no longer strategic, it is mandatory. The body reduces range, favors cover, and avoids exposure even when avoidance costs opportunity. This strategy keeps danger at bay. It does not restore advantage. The environment responds by closing in slowly. Not through pursuit, but through anticipation. Paths that once offered safety now feel watched. The body senses alignment too often to dismiss moments where silence holds longer than it should, where space seems occupied before anything is visible. The realization arrives quietly. There is no safe direction anymore. Advance exposes weakness. Retreat extends vulnerability. Stillness invites attention. The rules that once separated these options have dissolved. The body adapts by becoming irregular. Movement loses rhythm. Pauses vary in length. Direction changes abruptly without pattern. This unpredictability fractures alignment temporarily, buying brief relief at the cost of efficiency. Energy drains faster, but pressure scatters just enough to prevent escalation. This is survival by disruption. It cannot last. Fatigue sets in deeper now, no longer confined to muscle. It reaches into focus, narrowing awareness at the edges. Signals arrive late. Corrections lag. The body compensates instinctively, but compensation now consumes as much energy as action. Another opportunity appears near the boundary of known ground. It is small, incomplete, but it is something. Instinct urges immediate action. Take what is offered before it vanishes. Experience urges restraint. This is the kind of moment that has led to loss. The body hesitates just long enough to feel both urges collide. Then it commits. The movement is sharp, decisive, and costly. Speed collapses distance quickly, but the terrain resists more than expected. The body adjusts mid-action, burning energy to maintain balance. The attempt resolves without success, ending in withdrawal that leaves the body exposed longer than planned. This time the environment responds, not with force, with position. Pressure tightens from an unexpected angle, closing off routes the body assumed were open. The realization lands abruptly. This was not coincidence. The environment did not react to the action. It anticipated it. The body pivots, abandoning efficiency entirely in favor of escape. Movement becomes raw, driven by necessity rather than precision. The body reaches cover, but only just. Breath burns. Muscles tremble. The old injury flares, demanding attention that cannot be spared. The body holds still, forcing silence. The environment settles around it. Pressure diffused but present. Nothing escalates. Nothing retreats. The balance holds in a fragile stalemate. This is the new reality. Survival without advantage. Movement without certainty. Choice without safety. The body remains alert, but the alertness now costs energy it cannot afford. The land offers no guidance on how to proceed. It does not reveal which path carries less risk, only that all paths carry some. The chapter closes with this understanding. There is no longer a correct response. Instinct alone is insufficient. Restraint alone is dangerous. Adaptation has become reactive rather than strategic. The body will have to endure a phase where survival is maintained not by choosing well, but by choosing continuously, adjusting moment by moment without confidence that any adjustment will help. The land does not care how this feels. It continues to apply pressure evenly, waiting for exhaustion to do what force no longer needs to. And somewhere ahead, beyond the shrinking margins and broken rhythms, the story is moving toward a point where indecision will no longer be an option. Because when there is no safe direction left, the next choice will not be about advantage. It will be about loss. The break does not arrive with violence. It arrives with clarity. The body recognizes it before the land does not as danger, but as a limit that can no longer be negotiated. The margins that once narrowed have collapsed entirely. There is no room left to absorb error, no buffer to soften consequence. Every movement now draws directly from what remains. The environment feels closer, not because distance has changed, but because space has lost its neutrality. Every patch of ground carries implication. Every pause feels observed not by something specific, but by the accumulated pressure of the place itself. The body moves with care, but care no longer guarantees safety. The opportunity that triggers the break appears ordinary. It does not announce itself as decisive. It does not demand immediate attention. It simply exists at the edge of perception, small enough to ignore, significant enough to matter. Under earlier conditions, it would not have been worth considering. Now it cannot be dismissed. Hunger has crossed a threshold. Fatigue has settled into muscle and focus alike. The body no longer has the option to wait for something better. This moment, imperfect as it is, represents continuation. Instinct urges action, not with confidence, but with insistence. The body responds automatically, aligning itself toward the possibility before calculation can interfere. This time there is no hesitation. The delay that defined earlier failures does not appear. The movement begins cleanly. For a brief moment it feels like alignment has returned. Distance collapses as expected. Timing feels correct. The body remembers how to move without resistance, how to let instinct complete what it begins. Then the environment responds. Not abruptly, not aggressively. It shifts. The ground offers less stability than anticipated. Sound carries in a direction it shouldn't. The geometry of the space changes subtly enough to alter outcome without announcing itself. The body compensates instinctively, but the compensation arrives too late. The correction costs everything. Balance falters. Speed bleeds into effort. The body pushes through, refusing to abort the action, knowing that withdrawal now would be worse. Energy drains rapidly, leaving no reserve for recovery. The attempt fails, not completely, but decisively. The body withdraws under strain, absorbing impact it cannot soften. The old injury flares sharply, demanding attention that cannot be given. Movement becomes uneven. Control fractures into fragments. This is the point of no return. The body reaches cover by necessity rather than precision, collapsing into stillness that is not chosen. Breath burns. Muscles tremble under accumulated cost. The land settles around the body without escalation, as if acknowledging that the exchange is complete. Something has changed permanently. The body tests movement and finds limitation where capability once existed. Weight shifts unevenly. Speed, once reliable, now requires preparation. Recovery no longer happens quickly enough to erase mistakes. The break is not just physical, it is strategic. The body understands now that the old rules cannot be reclaimed. Acting early failed. Acting late failed. Acting decisively failed. The environment has reached a state where action itself extracts payment that cannot be recovered. Survival has crossed into maintenance. The pressure nearby does not close in. It does not need to. The land has already done its work. The body is now constrained by what it cannot afford to spend. Each future decision will be shaped by this outcome, whether acknowledged or not. The silence that follows is heavy, not empty. It is the silence after inevitability has been established. The body holds still, conserving what remains, recalibrating, not toward advantage, but toward endurance. The concept of winning has disappeared entirely. Only continuation remains. The environment offers no indication of what comes next. No threat advances. No opportunity presents itself. The body is left alone with consequence, forced to accept a new reality, where every movement will be judged by what it costs rather than what it gains. This is the point the story has been moving toward. Not a collapse, not a defeat, a reduction. The body is still alive, still capable, but the range of futures available has narrowed sharply. The wild has not taken everything, but it has taken enough. The chapter ends without resolution. The body rests in shallow stillness, not sleeping, not recovering, simply holding. The land continues around it, indifferent to the shift it has enforced. Somewhere beyond this moment, the next phase waits, one where survival will no longer be about instinct, misaligned with environment. It will be about what remains after misalignment has already taken its toll. The break has occurred. There is no path back to how things worked before. Only forward into a survival shaped by limitation, memory, and cost that can no longer be delayed. The environment does not rush the ending. It waits for the body to arrive there on its own. After the break, time behaves differently. Movement slows, not because the land demands it, but because the body can no longer afford anything else. Each shift in position must be justified. Each adjustment draws from reserves that no longer replenish between efforts. The world has narrowed to what can be sustained. The animal understands this without thinking. Survival has moved into a different phase, one where outcomes are no longer shaped by opportunity, but by limits. The question is no longer what can be gained, but what must be protected to continue at all. Then the final situation presents itself. It is not dramatic at first glance. No sudden convergence. No clear threat advancing with intent. It arrives as a convergence of constraints, dwindling energy, restricted movement, and a space that offers one path forward while quietly closing the others. The body senses it immediately. There will be no detours here, no alternative routes to test. The terrain funnels movement into a narrow corridor of possibility. Entering it will demand commitment. Avoiding it will demand endurance the body no longer has. This is the choice. Advance into uncertainty with a body already compromised, or remain where limitation will tighten until continuation becomes impossible. The environment does not favor either option. It simply removes the illusion that a third exists. Instinct speaks first, not with urgency but with memory. It recalls the countless moments where movement preserved life, when hesitation did not. It offers a simple directive: go forward before waiting becomes collapse. Restraint answers immediately. It reminds the body of cost, of the injury that now defines movement, of the way every decisive action has extracted payment that could not be recovered. It warns that commitment here may end everything quickly. The body stands between these forces without resolution. The space ahead does not change. It remains narrow, exacting, demanding alignment that the body is no longer certain it can provide. The longer the body waits, the more the environment confirms what must be done, not through threat, but through inevitability. The animal moves, not because it believes this will succeed, because remaining still will fail more slowly. The first steps are measured, careful not to provoke a response from the land too soon. The body uses cover where it exists, angles where they reduce exposure, timing that minimizes strain. This is not the clean commitment instinct once demanded. It is negotiated movement. The environment responds by tightening, not closing in, but reducing tolerance. Sounds carry farther. The ground offers less forgiveness. Each step becomes louder, more expensive. The corridor does not punish movement, it simply records it. The body continues. Pain flares where the injury has never fully healed. The body compensates, redistributing effort in ways that erode balance elsewhere. The movement remains forward, but it is uneven, costly, and increasingly difficult to correct. Halfway through, the moment clarifies. There will be no clean exit. The corridor does not open into relief. It opens into exposure that demands speed the body no longer has. The animal recognizes this instantly. Instinct urges acceleration, spend what remains now, or lose everything by hesitation. Restraint urges withdrawal, abort while retreat is still possible. Accept the slow attrition that might preserve life a little longer. Both options are bad. Both will take something that cannot be replaced. The body commits fully for the first time since the break. It accelerates, not with confidence, but with resolve. The movement is raw, stripped of finesse, driven by necessity rather than alignment. Energy drains rapidly. Each stride demands correction. Each correction costs more than the last. The environment answers, not with attack, with consequence. The ground shifts unexpectedly beneath weight. The body adjusts, but the adjustment arrives a fraction too late. Balance falters. Speed fractures. The animal stumbles not enough to fall, but enough to break momentum irreversibly. This is the climax, not the moment of danger, but the moment of accounting. The body pushes through, refusing collapse, forcing continuation at a cost that will define everything that follows. The injury worsens not catastrophically, but decisively. Something that once limited now constrains. The corridor releases the body, not into safety, into aftermath. The animal reaches the far side and stops abruptly, forced into stillness by exhaustion rather than choice. Breath burns. Muscles shake under accumulated strain. The land settles around the animal without escalation, as if the exchange has concluded. The choice has been made. The body remains alive, but something essential has been traded. Mobility is reduced. Endurance is compromised. The future that once contained multiple paths now offers only those that can be navigated under this new constraint. The wild has not taken everything, but it has taken enough to change the shape of survival permanently. The animal holds still, letting the environment confirm what has already been decided. No pursuit follows. No opportunity appears. The land does not celebrate the outcome or condemn it. It records it. This was not a victory. It was a decision forced by accumulation. A moment where instinct and restraint converged not into clarity, but into necessity. The outcome is not clean. It does not resolve the story. It defines its limits. The animal has crossed into a phase of survival where every future choice will be measured against this cost, where risk cannot be taken lightly, where hesitation and decisiveness have both proven dangerous. The climax ends without spectacle, with the body still breathing, still present, still inside the world that demanded this payment. The environment moves on, indifferent to the exchange it has completed. Somewhere beyond this place, conditions will change again. New pressures will arise. New decisions will be required. But none of them will be made with the body that existed before this moment. That body is gone. What remains will continue. The land returns to its rhythm. Light shifts across the ground with the same indifference it has always shown. Wind moves through familiar paths. Sounds settle back into patterns that suggest continuity, not conclusion. From a distance, nothing about this place signals that anything has changed. But the animal knows otherwise. It rises slowly, testing weight before committing. Movement is possible but altered. What once flowed now requires management. Each step carries awareness of limitation that did not exist before. The body has learned something the environment will never explain. It moves on, not far, not quickly, just enough to remain within the narrow space it can now afford. Hunger remains present, but it no longer dominates decision-making. The priority has shifted from gain to preservation. Survival has become a question of duration rather than outcome. This is the aftermath. Not defeat, not triumph. Adjustment. The environment reflects this change subtly. Paths that once invited movement now feel expensive. Areas avoided before become unavoidable. The animal's range contracts not because it chooses to, but because the cost of expansion is now too high. The world has not grown smaller. The animal's margin within it has. The central question returns without announcement. Was the hesitation that shaped this outcome a failure of instinct or an attempt at adaptation? There is no clear answer. The refusal to act immediately did not kill the animal, but it did not save it cleanly either. The decision to delay, to calculate, to hesitate at the edges of instinct traded certainty for continuation. What followed was not collapse, but erosion. Another interpretation exists. Perhaps instinct itself is not absolute. Perhaps it functions best within environments that repeat themselves closely enough to remain predictable. When repetition breaks, instinct does not fail, it lags. And lag in a world that measures in moments carries consequence. The animal does not analyze these possibilities. It cannot. It responds only to what is now true. The body adapts to its new limits, shaping behavior around preservation rather than pursuit. Movement becomes economical. Exposure shortens. Unpredictability is maintained not as strategy, but as necessity. Life continues in this adjusted form. The land will test it again. Scarcity will return. Pressure will reassemble. Another moment will come where instinct urges action and restraint urges delay. When that moment arrives, it will not be met by the same body or the same margin. The past cannot be undone, only carried forward. The environment does not record intention. It does not reward effort. It remembers only outcome. And outcome, once established, becomes the ground upon which every future decision must stand. The animal moves out of view, not escaping the story, but extending it into conditions that remain unknown. Somewhere beyond the limits of this place, the wild waits with the same impartial precision it has always held. The story does not end here. It pauses, leaving behind a question that has no simple answer, one that lingers not just in the wild, but in every system shaped by change. When the world shifts faster than instinct can adapt, is survival about choosing correctly, or about enduring the cost of being slightly late?